Welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Here are today's top stories. The largest relief package in history has finally passed in the Senate. After it passes in the House and gets the president's signature, it will send out $2 trillion to help unemployed workers, small businesses, and major American industries hit by the virus pandemic. The G20 world leaders come together virtually to coordinate the global response to the pandemic while minding the almost worldwide guidelines on safe distancing. In the Czech Republic, plane loads of virus test kits sent over from China are being cast aside. The tests have an error rate of up to 80% during the early stages of infection, making them highly unreliable. And the head of FedEx pledges that the company will continue to deliver despite the virus pandemic. The company is also helping government agencies get needed medical supplies. The G20 world leaders had a meeting of another kind today in a virtual setup. The current chair, King Salman of Saudi Arabia, called for a united global response to tackle the fallout from the pandemic.
Leaders from the group of 20 major economies spoke via video link on Thursday. They focused on combating the pandemic and its economic impacts. G20 finance ministers and central bankers agreed this week to develop an action plan to respond to the outbreak. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce urged G20 leaders to keep supply chains open and avoid export controls. This year's G20 chair, King Salman of Saudi Arabia, tweeted that the purpose of the virtual summit was to unite efforts towards a global response. Salman said in the meeting it was the responsibility of the world leaders to fund research into treatments and the development of a vaccine.
During the teleconference, King Salman said that on the trade front, the G20 must send a strong signal to restore confidence in the global economy by resuming the normal flow of goods and services. He emphasized that it should be done as soon as possible and should focus on vital medical supplies. The G20 nations also pledged to inject $5 trillion into the global economy to counter a potential recession. And in the U.S., $2 trillion. That's the figure put on a stimulus bill unanimously passing through the Senate late last night. The funds will go towards helping unemployed workers and major American industries hit by the virus pandemic.
The bill is passed.
The U.S. Senate unanimously passed a $2 trillion stimulus bill on Wednesday, aimed at helping unemployed workers and industries hurt by the coronavirus pandemic, as well as providing billions of dollars to buy urgently needed medical equipment. The divided Senate came together to vote 96-0.
I'm proud to announce tonight not a single senator voted against this $2 trillion rescue bill to save American individuals, small businesses, large businesses, and to provide considerable funding for the healthcare workers and the scientists and the doctors and others who are trying to solve this pandemic.
It's the largest rescue package in American history. Included in the stimulus package, direct payments of up to $3,000 to U.S. families, up to $500 billion for distressed industries, including hard-hit airlines.
And so when we passed this bill on the floor of the Senate, we didn't hug each other, we just waved from a distance.
It is intended to flood the economy with cash to stem the impact of an intensifying pandemic that has killed more than 900 people in the United States and infected at least 60,000. Trump also told reporters on Wednesday he would sign it into law as soon as it reached his desk.
House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer says the chamber will pass the bill on Friday, and members won't have to travel back to Washington to cast their votes. And now moving to international deployments, Defense Secretary Mark Esper has frozen the movements of all overseas troops for 60 days due to the CCP virus. The order will apply to all U.S. forces, civilian personnel, and families.
The freeze works in both directions. Troops who were supposed to come home will now have to wait. And the same is true for military personnel in the U.S. who are scheduled to deploy overseas. The new order will not impact the continued drawdown of U.S. forces from Afghanistan. It's scheduled to be complete within 135 days following the signed agreement. In all, the freeze is expected to affect about 90,000 service members, but there are several exceptions to the freeze. Most notably, naval vessels scheduled to return to the U.S. will sail as planned, and additional exceptions may be granted on a case-by-case basis. The Defense Department is also raising the military's health protection level to its second highest stage. The effort aims to slow the spread in its ranks and apply to all military installations globally.
And earlier this month, the Pentagon froze most domestic travel for service members, civilian employees, and their family members. The order remains in effect until May 11th. And negative interest rates come to the U.S. as investors go for safer options in an uncertain market, even though the Dow Jones rose almost 500 points yesterday afternoon.
Stock markets in the U.S. continuing to climb from the previous session, with the Dow Jones up nearly 500 points as of Wednesday afternoon. It comes as the White House and Senate reach a deal on the $2 trillion stimulus package. But some U.S. Treasury bonds now have a negative interest rate for the first time in years, signaling a high demand for safe investments in an uncertain market. And in rural areas, farmers now making farm-to-door deliveries as customers isolate themselves and are frustrated by empty shelves in stores.
We have an immune-compromised child now, and so we are choosing not to do the farmers market. Instead, we're doing a full, just direct porch delivery service through an online storefront that we've made public.
Farmers in Oklahoma delivering products straight to customers' doorsteps with no face-to-face interaction, especially in rural areas where services like Amazon Fresh aren't available. And Amazon being hit hard as workers at 10 facilities test positive for the virus. The company reports an employee at its Staten Island fulfillment center tested positive, with other positive cases in 7 states, including California and Texas. Amazon has closed some sites but has mostly stayed in operation. And at FedEx Field Stadium in Maryland, where the Washington Redskins football team plays, the National Guard is setting up a testing site. Tents are being set up in the parking lot where residents can be tested. Local media reports the site will be operational this week.
And in related news, the National Football League is closing all team facilities starting Wednesday evening. In response to the pandemic, the league will reassess the situation and determine whether to keep the facilities closed or to reopen on April 8th. And across the U.S., jails in several states are releasing inmates to reduce the spread of the virus in jails. Officials are calling the releases humane, but critics say the measure is a danger to public safety. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more.
Los Angeles County, New York City, and several other places have begun releasing inmates to stop the spread of coronavirus in jails. Thousands have been released. New York City started releasing hundreds of inmates this week convicted of low-level and nonviolent offenses who have less than 1 year of their sentence left.
When we looked at that category of people, there's over 500 inmates in that category. There is a substantial group that, because of very specific legal issues, I'm not able to immediately release.
But not everyone is happy with the idea of releasing inmates for obvious reasons. The Correction Officers Union was disappointed with the decision, saying that it turns a public health crisis into a public safety crisis. And the founder of Blue Lives Matter NYC said the plan's not bulletproof, but he said it would be a smart idea to stop the virus from coming in.
There's a lot of people that come in and out of the jail system every day. People are released and people are incarcerated. So there's a good chance that it may not have been a visitor or a worker. It could have been an individual that was brought into jail today that wasn't there yesterday that all of a sudden started infecting people.
The Correction Officers Union and council members are asking the mayor to set up a testing facility in Rikers Island to test workers and officers and to thoroughly screen them every day. The Wall Street Journal reported on Wednesday that 50 inmates at Rikers have tested positive for the virus. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
Virus test kits sent from China to the Czech Republic have been found to serve limited use. The tests often give false results if used within the first week after infection, making high rates of misdiagnosis possible.
In the Czech Republic, local healthcare workers found that up to 80% of the tests sent by China give false results, making them highly unreliable. A medical official said the test error rate was quite high. The rapid testing kits offer a quicker diagnosis, taking just 25 minutes to reveal a result. The tests previously used in Czechia take much longer, with a wait time of 6 hours. But the gift from China did not live up to healthcare workers' expectations. The tests produce false positive as well as false negative results. They are unable to reliably detect the virus in the first 5 to 7 days from infection, limiting the usefulness of these tests. A document from the Czech National Institute of Public Health states the tests can only play a supportive role in virus testing and are not to be used for diagnosis. Misdiagnosis could have dangerous consequences, such as risking the health of those tested and others by applying the wrong precautions. A patient testing negative when they're actually infected could result in the widespread infection of others. The 150,000 tests arrived in a Czech Special Army plane just over a week ago from the Chinese city of Shenzhen. The tests were quickly distributed to police, soldiers, and firefighters, as well as big hospitals. Media outlet Taiwan News reported that China did not donate the tests to Czech Republic, although China's state media made it sound that way by failing to mention that they profited from the transaction. In fact, Czechia paid for the tests.
State secretaries from the Group of Seven or G7 countries meeting by teleconference yesterday, discussing how best to combat the CCP virus or coronavirus. Also on the agenda, China's campaign of disinformation.
Combating the CCP virus was top of the agenda at a meeting of the G7 countries today. Secretary of State Pompeo confirming the U.S. is sending excess medical supplies to France and Italy. The G7 also discussed the Chinese Communist Party's disinformation campaign around the origin of the virus.
There was a lot of discussion today amongst the G7 about the intentional disinformation campaign that China has been and continues to be engaged in. You see it in the social media, you see it in remarks from senior people inside the Chinese Communist Party talking about whether this was a U.S. brought to China. I mean, this is crazy talk. And every member of the G7 today saw that this is disinformation campaign.
When asked if the U.S. was still willing to cooperate with the regime, Pompeo said the U.S. has always been ready to do so. The U.S. offered to send scientists and experts to Wuhan when the CCP virus was first discovered.
But we weren't able to do that. The Chinese Communist Party wouldn't permit that to happen.
Pompeo said that instead of cooperating on the virus, the CCP actually withheld information about it. Experts say the cover-up cost the world months of preparations. When asked if Congress would seek compensation from the CCP, Pompeo didn't rule it out, but said that now is a time for saving lives.
But there'll be a right time after we've managed to address this crisis, after we've managed to get these economies back on their feet. There'll be a time for the world to evaluate responsibility for what took place. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Coming up, a recent conversation circulating on Chinese social media platforms says China is selling donated aid supplies to the U.S. Find out more after the break.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
In China, something can be illegal, but still in common practice. For example, bribery, or intellectual property theft, or Uber.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people and counting. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? It's starring me.
It's more and more obvious that China is having a major influence on the U.S.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? 中国揭秘.
In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the only show on TV or the internet. It will be the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Have you heard of China Uncensored?
Yeah, I have.
You actually have? He's heard of China Uncensored.
I love China Uncensored.
A Chinese doctor recounts seeing how an old man was murdered by an unjust healthcare system. NTD Xiaohua Gu has more.
Dr. Liu said he witnessed another doctor murdering a patient inside ICU. The doctor injected drugs that caused the patient's death.
A while after the injection, the old man's body started trembling.
The patient was a man in his 80s. He was sent to the intensive care unit where Leo was an intern. To protect Dr. Leo's identity, we've hidden his name and altered his voice.
He had respiratory failure and slight heart failure. He wasn't an urgent patient sent by an ambulance. He still could have recovered.
ICU treatment is costly. After 4 or 5 days, the man had over $7,000 to pay. The problem was he couldn't afford it.
The hospital wouldn't shoulder the cost, but doctors, nurses, and all staff in the intensive care unit have to. The hospitals wouldn't spend a penny. The system just works like that. You may not be familiar with it. Usually the Bureau of Civil Affairs should pay for it, but they refuse because this old man has children. The children don't want him to be treated. They said, "We're working in other regions. We won't be back," and the hospital can decide what to do with him.
Leo said he remembers it was a morning in early January. He saw the deputy chief of ICU injecting drugs into the old man's body. He thought the deputy chief was trying to save the man from dying, but he didn't see any emergency care equipment. He questioned other staff about what the deputy chief was doing.
At the time, all the doctors and nurses in the ICU were pretending to be busy with their own work. They knew what was happening, they just didn't say anything.
Leo said a while after the injection, the man started trembling.
Because he was injected with very powerful respiratory stimulants that are undiluted, he started to have quick and shallow breaths.
Leo then saw that it was potassium chloride and lobeline that was injected. He says potassium chloride can induce cardiac failure. The deputy chief noticed Leo watching and asked him to remove the man's breathing tube.
Basically, he means if you reveal anything about this, then you will be held responsible as well. He asked me to remove the tracheal intubation, so I would be the one that ended the man's life. I was forced to do this. I've been very depressed about it.
Leo says what he saw isn't a standalone incident. It's common and still happens.
Widowed seniors, those without children, or whose children work in other regions, after their situation worsens and they're sent to the ICU, if the children don't submit the fee in time, the elderly are secretly killed.
He said in the Chinese healthcare system, hospitals have to make a profit. The earned money then goes to the county-level finance bureau. If the hospital doesn't make money, then management's jobs are on the line. Doctors and nurses have to pay for medical costs if patients don't. He said the situation is cruel and very real. He said the man's death was caused by the healthcare system. Reporting by Xiaohua Gu, NTD News.
And a recent leak on Chinese social media appears to show aid materials donated by Chinese Americans to Wuhan now being sold back to the U.S. NTD Xiwen Rong has more.
There's discussion on Twitter over whether aid supplies donated from the U.S. to China were actually sold back to the U.S. On March 23rd, a screenshot of a WeChat group titled "Helping the American Hospitals" was discovered. One user is trying to sell boxes of protective clothing. The buyer notices the boxes are labeled "China, you got this," and asks if those boxes were originally donations. The seller claims they were shipped to China by her friend in the U.S. The buyer doubts the origin and asks for customs forms to prove it. But instead of getting an answer, he gets threatened. Another similar incident happened in late February. Guangxi netizens ordered 4,000 masks online. When they arrived, they saw the masks were from the Wuhan Federation of Trade Unions. When they examined further, the boxes were still labeled aid supplies. There's also the case of boxes of masks donated to Wuhan from Indonesia. The same boxes were then seen in another city in the same packaging. Later, they were bought and donated by a middle school student to the Lijiang Red Cross. These incidents raise questions about the origin of those supplies. Since the CCP virus outbreak in Wuhan, Chinese Americans and organizations have been donating masks to the epicenter. After the pandemic went global, masks were in short supply in many countries. A video obtained by our sister media Epoch Times shows boxes of masks at a post office in Wuhan. The video was posted on February 1st, when the outbreak in Wuhan was severe. The man in the video says, "This is only 1/10 of all its masks," and added, "Look, everyone, these are what we've received." A video posted on January 31st shows people not allowed to claim their packages at what they call a post office in Wuhan. Netizens speculated that the CCP was keeping and selling the masks themselves. They criticized the regime for its action, adding that this can only happen under the CCP. Reporting by Xiwen Rong, NTD News.
And coming up, we see how one American restaurant has adapted to the crisis. Find out how it's caring for its staff during the outbreak and more after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
The head of FedEx said the company is continuing to deliver into areas affected by the virus. The company is even helping to move supplies critical to combating the CCP virus spread.
FedEx continues to provide support to areas affected by the CCP virus. FedEx was deemed an essential business and allowed to operate during the lockdown. The company is also working with government agencies to move critical supplies.
We are moving pharmaceuticals, we're moving medical equipment, any kind of personal protection equipment, of course test kits, and so on. So we're doing a lot of work right now.
The company is still working despite changing regulations in different localities.
And especially now, it's very important that we operate because we're moving very important healthcare-related shipments around the world. So we are, of course, deal with local authorities and make decisions on a daily basis, but our network is operating.
UPS also said it's working with federal, state, and local governments to keep its trucks and planes running throughout the outbreak. But it did temporarily suspend deliveries and pickups in some virus hotspots in Italy. Both companies are set to benefit from the stimulus package passed in the Senate on Wednesday.
Apple CEO Tim Cook says the company is donating millions of masks to medical workers in the U.S., as well as European nations hardest hit by the pandemic.
I'm also very pleased to tell you this morning that Apple has sourced, procured, and is donating 10 million masks to the medical community in the United States. These people deserve our debt of gratitude for all of the work that they're doing on the front lines.
Cook also encouraged people to practice social distancing. He said he was grateful to everyone working in essential roles right now, like delivery drivers and people in warehouses, pharmacies, and supermarkets. And award-winning restaurant owner Chris Shepard is feeling the economic impact of the virus. His 4 restaurants in Texas have become 1, and he's granted leave to much of his staff. But he's changed his menu to suit the circumstances and is focused on reopening again once the outbreak passes.
As fewer people risk going out, even the country's top restaurants are struggling. Award-winning chef Chris Shepard has been forced to consolidate 4 of his Houston restaurants into 1. And instead of the steakhouse's usual high-end dining experience, he's now only serving takeout.
Normally our entrees are $38. We're selling everything at like $12, $14. So trying to keep it affordable. We're doing things we've never done before. I've never put chicken tenders and mac and cheese in a to-go container and done that, right? I've never made King Ranch chicken before. Guess what? We're doing it. Meatloaf like crazy.
As revenue dropped, Chris was forced to lay off most of his staff, but he hasn't forgotten about them. To make up for lost wages, he's cooking up a daily house meal to feed them.
I don't know. I don't know how long we can withstand this. I don't know. I mean, we have to make a certain number every day just to keep the lights on, so.
Economists say restaurants begin feeling the pinch first and hardest. And while Chris and his team do everything they can to stay afloat, he's seen other local restaurants who've given up the fight.
I don't know. I don't know how long we can withstand this. I don't know. I mean, we have to make a certain number every day just to keep the lights on, so.
But hope may be on the horizon for Chris, as Congress finalizes a relief bill for small businesses, and the president hints at opening up the economy sooner rather than later.
Still to come, Forbes Travel Guide is celebrating 5-star service in London, despite much of the world staying put. Catch a glimpse of UK luxury and more after the break.
Are you tired of newspapers spinning the truth and pushing false narratives? And are you looking for honest coverage of Spygate, the true story of collusion? Or the truth behind the crisis at our southern border? Or how the Chinese Communist Party is working to subvert America and our way of life? Then you need to check out the Epoch Times newspaper. It's independent, nonpartisan, and it doesn't push any political agendas. Just go to readepoch.com and try it yourself for a full month for just $1. You'll absolutely love it.
Even chocolate bunnies are getting protective face masks this Easter as the virus pandemic disrupts traditions in Switzerland and around the world. The Easter holidays are likely to be somber this year as millions of people are expected to stay at home. But one bakery in the Swiss capital of Bern is working to bring back a bit of cheerfulness. It's outfitted this year's iconic chocolate rabbits with white, sugary masks. They've proven to be a hit with customers. Only a few have grumbled about the innovative faceware for the bunnies, which sell for $8.70. Catholics will celebrate Easter Sunday, which ends the Lenten season on April 12th. And for those of us who are housebound, it doesn't hurt to dream. London has a huge array of luxury stays. Let's take a look at some of the 5-star hotels listed on Forbes Travel Guide this year.
It's the Oscars of the travel industry. Forbes Travel Guide celebrates 5-star service. Brown's Hotel London has seen many famous faces walk through its doors since first opening in 1837.
The eclectic mix of international and national travellers that are so discerning and require such a high level of service is why London will always strive and achieve the style of service that Forbes has awarded us for.
Other new 5-star additions to the Forbes Travel Guide are the Four Seasons Hotel London at Trinity Square, the Berkeley, the Edgerton House Hotel, the Milestone Hotel and Residences, and Rosewood London. Hotel 41 general manager says Forbes looks for high-quality service as well as at the facilities.
And more about the service coming more and more. In fact, Forbes actually as a standard, to be a Forbes 5-star hotel, you have more service standards measured than you do facility without dismissing the facility importance.
UK Hospitality says hotels were filled 15% less this quarter. The industry association says forward bookings across hotels, restaurants, pubs and bars are also down by 50%. Despite the challenges within hospitality and tourism this year, Hendry believes London will endure as a bastion of luxury living for hotels.
And that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in. Catch up again at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Tiffany Meyer.